Aloha and good afternoon. My name is Juergen Steinmetz and joining you from eTurbo News and live stream in Honolulu, Hawaii. And with me is Dr. Peter Tarlow. He's joining us from College Station, Texas. It's a nice, fairly sunny day today here. Many people at the beach and at the pools, and it's warm and nice. And Peter's telling me he has a weather coming his way. Peter, what's going on?
Yeah, I think much of the United States is going to be really jealous of Hawaii right now because there's a major storm that's developing in Southern California, and it's supposedly going to create a major line going across the country all the way to New England. And yesterday, the temperature here in Texas was about 80 degrees. That's about 28 degrees Celsius. And beautiful, beautiful blue skies. This morning when I woke up, it had dropped from 80 degrees to 40 degrees. That's about 5 degrees Celsius. By the afternoon, it was at 1 degree Celsius, about 37 degrees. And tonight it's going down to about 27 degrees, which is about negative 4 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees Celsius. So you could really see that it was one day to the next, the temperature just plummeted. And this is supposed to take place across much of the United States with wind chill factors going as low as 20 to 30 degrees below zero. The real fear is that there's going to be some major ice storms because it's accompanied with a rainstorm. And if it's that cold, the rain turns to ice. That's going to foul up all the airports, especially Chicago, New York, Denver. And those are, of course, Newark, which are the main hub airports. And that means flight delays. So you have the problem as it is with lower staff because of COVID. You have a lot of planes not flying or flight delays because they don't have as many people working at the airports or on the flights, flight personnel. And then you add to that weather problems. It could be a very rough few days. Now, hopefully, with the weather, you never know. It could change tomorrow. But if the predictions are right, we should expect some real delays around the country. And that just means, of course, people are frustrated. They're angry. We already have lots of problems with people angry on flights because of masks and other stuff and taking it out on flight attendants and really awful situations. And then if we have flight delays and people not knowing when they're going to get on a plane and stuck at airports, you're going to have a lot of unhappy people. So hopefully this won't come to pass, but at least according to most of the predictions, we should be expecting a rough few days, at least in North America. And that will also, by the way, be impacting Canada, which has more than enough problems, to say the least, with tremendous government problems right now, and with basically Canada under close to martial law. So that's going to really throw North America into a tizzy.
And talking about martial law, I mean, our main news, and I think everyone's main news and concern is right now the situation in Ukraine and Russia, what really has the potential of becoming a worldwide crisis, if not even a world war. So that is for sure not only a concern by anyone, but also specifically for the travel and tourism industry.
Yes.
And I would say more specific for the European tourism industry, getting out of COVID. And there is a lot of progress made out of COVID. And Peter, you will tell us a little bit about the new vaccine, what I think is becoming now dominant in Israel and in Germany. Yes. And what it is all about. And we're waiting for it to be approved here in the United States. These are all positive development, but what has happened in Ukraine is not only negative, it's catastrophic. Yeah. And so we're following this news. We had a discussion a few days ago with our friends in Ukraine about tourism professionals and the head of the Ukraine National Tourism Organization telling us that everyone is relaxed and no one isn't really worried about it. We're supposed to have a second session tomorrow, and that is postponed because I think people are now getting worried about it, specifically with the region in eastern Ukraine being now occupied by so-called Russian peacekeeping forces. To be fair to this, there has been a war going on between the eastern Ukraine and the rest of the Ukraine for 8 years, what is almost twice the time World War II lasted. So a lot of people died. 17,000 is the official number in this conflict. It's ongoing. So the eastern Ukraine really hasn't been a part of the rest of the Ukraine. So Russia is using this as an excuse to now recognize these two self-proclaimed republics, the People Republic of Luhansk and the People Republic of Donetsk, and sending these peacekeeping forces in there. Again, no one seems to be asking the people who live there, because according to the information, and you know, we have inside information here through some people who don't want to be named, who have lived in this part of the region, who are from this region and now and work for eTurbo News. Apparently, the majority of the people who live there, from this type of information we're getting, are very much pro-Russian. They don't mind, they just want peace. They don't even mind the Ukrainians, but they want peace. And now the latest development we just reported about, and I don't think any media has mentioned this, and we have this from someone who lives there and who's in this situation, is that yesterday they were celebrating the Soviet Army Day, both in Russia and Ukraine. The only difference is in this part of Ukraine, in the eastern part, only all the generations are celebrating it. And so they do this, it's an official holiday in Russia, while in the rest of Ukraine, only the older generation is celebrating it if they're born and raised under the Soviet Union. But the interesting part is, it's also called the Men's Day, because at that time only men were allowed to join the army. And that's actually still the case in the Ukraine, from what I understand. The men are preferred to join the army, or are obligated to join the army if called. So in this occupied territory, or call it independent part of Ukraine now, depending how you see it, yesterday streets were deserted. Instead of having men celebrating this holiday, women were celebrating this holiday. There were women seen in the bars, in the restaurants, on the streets, and there are absolutely no men. And the reason is, men would love to celebrate it apparently, but they couldn't, because they're worried about these trucks roaming around the city of Luhansk and Donetsk, or better, the People's Republic now, of Donetsk and Luhansk, looking for people 18 and older, and they don't even stop with retired people to load them on trucks, drive away, and enlist them for the army to fight against the other Ukrainians. So it's a very confusing situation, very scary situation, and we don't know what is next.
Yeah. From a tourism perspective, there's a lot that's going on. First of all, I think Europe this week, certainly in the UK and a number of other places, had a really terrible winter storm again. So they're having a very, very hard winter in Europe. And that winter, of course, is creating travel problems, because when it's pouring or it's ice, or you're just going to have those types of problems. So one, you have those problems starting, which are not man-made. Obviously, those are God-made problems, but those are problems to begin with. But then the real issue, there's lots of different worries about what might be going on in the Ukraine. I think it's only a Ukrainian issue. Many people in other countries may not care that much. I think many Americans are probably more interested in our border with Mexico and Canada than they are about Ukraine's borders. Europeans, on the other hand, ought to be very worried. And that would be an issue that I think Europeans are going to have to look at. That means lots of different issues may be taking place. And if it's not just Ukraine, and of course we don't know that, but should it not be just Ukraine, but turns into a wider European war, the British Prime Minister has spoken about the possibility of the worst war in Europe since World War II. Then you're going to see a real dip in European travel. It's going to really hurt Europe tremendously. How will that impact worldwide tourism? We don't know. Will people just avoid Europe and go to other places such as Mexico, Hawaii, Indonesia, Asia? That's a possibility. On the other hand, would a war in Ukraine also inspire a war in the Eastern Pacific? especially around Taiwan. And what would that do to the world travel? So we don't know those things yet. We do know that people don't like to travel when the world is upset. We do know that people are going to be very careful about how much money they expend. And of course, the biggest issue is terrible inflation. Now, it's running in the United States currently by government figures at 7.5%. It may very well be up to 10%. And one of the things that many Americans do not realize is that because we have now basically stopped 90% of our home oil production, we are importing oil from Russia, of all places. So that's kind of created the whole new issue to begin with. I don't think it's at all inconceivable to see oil, the price of a gallon of gas going as high as $10 a gallon. And that means if you have to put food on your table or go on a trip, you're not going to go on the trip. And if gas prices go up considerably, it doesn't take much to figure out that airlines are going to increase their prices radically. Well, what happens then if you're a family of 4 or 5 and you're going to spend $500 a ticket? Now all of a sudden that ticket has gone to $800. Well, that's 300 times 4 is an extra $1,200 that you don't have. So inflation is hitting both here and in Europe. Those are the two biggest generators of out markets of tourists going around the world. And if people can't afford it, they're going to buy food and medicine and schooling for their family before they buy travel. So I think this is something the travel industry is going to have to really consider. Right now, one of the ways it's done it is by cutting back on services. I think that's probably a poor methodology. I know that coming from Mexico to Houston on a business class flight, they served a bag of pretzels and a cup of coffee. And when I asked how come, and this was a lunch flight and the same on a dinner flight, they said, well, we have to try to make up our bottom line, so we're giving less. Well, you know what? No one's going to spend an extra $300 or $400 for first class tickets when we're getting a cup of coffee and a bag of pretzels for lunch or dinner. So that I think is going to hurt. I think people will say, well, you know what? Economy class is perfectly fine. I'll just learn to live with it. So that's just going to be a real challenge for the tourism industry.
And Peter, that trend has been going on for 20 years, unfortunately. I mean, both of us probably remember very clear the times if you do go first class, you get your caviar, you get your Dom Perignon. Yeah. That is all history. You know, it's unfortunately, this whole thing took a lot of the prestige and fun out of flying, and it's going backwards. I can tell you from a friend of mine who works for the catering company at Munich International Airport. Him and his wife, they both work there, and they know what food is sold and how much the airlines are paying. Without saying amounts, I can tell you that most of the US-based carriers paying about half what a European airline is paying for economy or business class food, depending on what it is. So we're really cutting down on expenses on US carriers when it comes to pay for these type of services.
And I understand at some level, but if you have the hassles of travel, you have people facing inflationary problems, the fact that you're going to buy gas for your car to go to work before you go on a trip. And then when you go on the trip, you're treated poorly. That's not a good winning combination to win back travelers. And I certainly know, of course, in Hawaii, you can't do this, but in most of the United States, and probably it's true in Europe also, most people take the policy now that if the trip is less than 6 hours, they drive there. You don't have to worry about the airport. You don't have to worry about getting there early. You don't have to worry about going through security. You can go when you want and you can leave when you want. So I think people are going to start finding alternatives, and those alternatives will not be ecologically friendly. They're going to actually be ecologically harmful. And on top of that, it's going to hurt especially the airline or the travel industry. And then people do that. They don't stay in hotels. they, the whole thing becomes kind of a negative spiral. So that's the negative side of that. On positive side, it may be that people who are going to go to Europe or people who are going to go to some other place are going to look, certainly in the American market, at the Caribbean and at Mexico. And those countries have got to make sure that they get their problems under control. And the number one problem in both the Caribbean and in Mexico is creating safe and secure environments so that people will want to go. And if they can do that, then they're going to be in a really good position.
Oh, no, absolutely. Safety and security always has been essential for travel and tourism to function, and especially in these times now, it becomes even more of an issue, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess.
Well, there is some other good news though on the market. I think you alluded to it a little bit. And it's both in Israel and Germany. Those countries have been working very carefully together. I think you know that I believe Israel is going to be basically opening up totally on March 1st, if I'm not mistaken. And much of that's also true in Germany. But there's new vaccines that have been developed. And these are really, we have to be very thankful for Pfizer and Moderna. And again, I have been vaccinated. I push them. But they had limited scope. There were too many breakthrough cases, and there were other issues. And supposedly some of the new vaccines that are being looked at, such as the Novavax, will be a vaccination for life. I think it's still a 2-shot series, but it will be a vaccination where you won't have to worry about keep getting booster shots, and supposedly a much more effective. Israel has switched now from Moderna and Pfizer to the Novavax, and it's had wonderful results. And I believe Germany is either has switched over or is in the process of switching over. Again, the Israelis and Germans are sharing data very carefully. So their data is a lot more accurate than what's unfortunately come out of the CDC. And of course, yesterday, the CDC took another hit when it had to admit that it has not been honest about releasing data, and it didn't trust the American public. And that's not good, because the CDC works for the people of the United States. The people of the United States are not vassals to the CDC. And that's why so much of the data we get has to come from Israel and has to come from Germany. And the CDC's excuse was that they haven't updated their computers. To which the question is, we have put in hundreds of millions of dollars. Why have they not upgraded those computers? So the CDC took a real hit yesterday. Both Democrats and Republicans really lambasted them. I think the good news is that there are some really new and more effective vaccines that will really put an end to COVID, or at least make it nothing more than a cold. And again, COVID is just kind of it's a coronavirus, which means it's interrelated to colds, it's interrelated to the flu. And you know what? The world did just fine prior to COVID when we had a flu, and we had a flu season. You got sick and you got better. And that was that, and we didn't close the world down for flu or for cold. Hopefully that will be the case, in the future for COVID. It just, we'll be done with masks. We'll be done with the misery of lockdowns, which were a total waste, we now know, by the Johns Hopkins study. And we can go to really start reactivating the tourism industry if we can only get peace in the world.
We're living in uncertain times, Peter, and we don't know what is next. And people now are talking already about a new strain, and well, maybe we better not get there and see how things develop.
Well, supposedly these new vaccines will be able to handle any strain that comes along. Now, again, that's supposedly, because until it really happens, you don't know. But if we are able to go to the next stage of vaccinations, then we'll be able to face those problems that come along down the pike.
Absolutely. Well, a lot more to talk about, but maybe we save some for tomorrow.
Yes.
Peter, I wish you a good night, and we see all of you back tomorrow. If you wanted to listen to any of our archives, just simply go to our YouTube channel. It's linked from all our pages. You can just click on YouTube and you will hear and watch what we have discussed at other times. And we have hundreds of broadcasts in there now and all different type of subjects and discussions. But Peter and I will be back later this week, and we wish you all a good day.
And let's wish that everybody take just a moment and pray for peace. Just take, I think, you know, maybe if all our listeners send prayers in whatever language they speak and whatever way their religiosity takes them, it might not help, but it won't do any harm. And I think praying for peace is never a bad thing.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it's well needed now, and peace through tourism is very much aligned, and well, let's hope we're making some progress. So, but
so I think we should end tonight with the word shaloha, which is half shalom and half haloha. We need to have peace and love in the world. So shaloha.
Shaloha, Peter, and for everyone else, have a good night, good morning, good day, and we talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.